Hey, welcome back. You know, sometimes the most unsettling thing isn't a sound, but the absence of one. The creak on the stair when you know you're home alone, that's one thing. But the feeling of a presence, a weight in the air of a room you just walked into, a silence so thick it feels deliberate, that's something else entirely. It's the silence of something watching. And that's where our story begins today. I'm Ibnul J. Farabi, and this is the Unexplained Archive, a show where we pull on the threads of the strange until something unravels. And today, we're unraveling a mystery that isn't about a winged monster or a spectral hound, but about an entity defined by what it does not do. This is episode 22, The Silent Intruder, Unmasking the Entity of Point Pleasant. Now, if you know your paranormal lore, you hear Point Pleasant and you immediately think Mothman. The red eyes, the giant wings, the prophecies of doom. And you'd be right. But what if I told you that the most pervasive, and in many ways more terrifying, phenomenon in that small West Virginia town wasn't the thing in the sky, but the thing in the home? During the same frenetic period of 1966 and 1967, dozens of residents, completely unrelated to each other, began reporting a similar, chilling experience. They called it simply the entity. This wasn't a sighting. It was an intrusion. People would wake in the dead of night with an overwhelming sense of dread, a primal certainty that they were not alone in their bedroom. They'd feel an immense weight pressed down on their chests, making it difficult, sometimes impossible, to breathe. They'd try to move, to scream, to reach for the lamp on the nightstand, and find themselves completely paralyzed. They were prisoners in their own bodies, aware and terrified, with a malevolent presence sharing the dark space with them. And through it all, utter silence. No footsteps, no growls, no whispers. Just the deafening quiet of this thing doing its work. One of the most compelling accounts comes from a young mother, Linda Scarberry. You might recognize her name. She was one of the original Mothman witnesses. But her experience with the entity was separate, and in her own words, far more personal. She described waking to that familiar crushing pressure, seeing a dark, man-shaped shadow darker than the room's darkness standing at the foot of her bed. It had no discernible features, just a silhouette of pure black. It watched. It imposed. For what felt like an eternity, she fought to move a single finger, to make any sound, while this silent form observed her struggle. And then, as suddenly as it came, the pressure lifted and it was gone. No sound of a door opening, no fading, just gone. Now, as an engineer, my mind immediately goes to the rational. Sleep paralysis, a well-documented neurological phenomenon where the brain wakes up before the body's sleep atonia. That muscle paralysis that keeps us from acting out our dreams wears off. It often comes with hypnagogic hallucinations, the feeling of a presence, the pressure on the chest, the shadow figures. Case closed, right? It's just biology. Except for the context. This wasn't isolated individuals scattered across the globe. This was a cluster, an outbreak, in one small town, within a specific, narrow window of time, concurrent with a wave of other high-strangeness events. The UFO sightings, the men in black visits, and of course, the Mothman itself. So, we have to ask, was this a case of mass psychogenic illness, a shared anxiety manifesting in similar physical symptoms? Or was it something else? Were the people of Point Pleasant, for reasons we may never understand, becoming sensitive to a form of intrusion, a parasitic attention from something that feeds on fear and thrives in silence? The entity never took anything. It never left a mark. It communicated nothing. Its entire modus operandi was to appear, to oppress, and to vanish. It was a psychological predator. This leads me to a personal reflection. Growing up in Bangladesh, I heard stories of the jinn, beings of smokeless fire, existing in a realm parallel to our own. They could be good, evil, or neutral, but the stories that stuck with me were of the intrusive ones. The ones that would sit on your chest as you slept, causing nightmares and breathlessness. We called it Boba, the suffocating night spirit. Hearing the Point Pleasant accounts for the first time sent a chill down my spine. It was the same story, told on the other side of the world. That cultural parallel is something I can't just engineer away. It speaks to a shared human experience of this specific terror, this archetype of the silent bed intruder that is woven into our collective subconscious. It makes me wonder if these phenomena, wherever they're reported, are tapping into the same deep, ancient fear. What makes the entity of Point Pleasant so uniquely haunting is its ambiguity. Unlike Mothman, which was seen, described, and even sketched, the entity is defined by a lack of evidence. It's a feeling, a disruption of the sanctity of private space. It treated the home not as a shelter, but as an open door. And in doing so, it created a mystery that is, in many ways, harder to dissect than a flying cryptid. You can't photograph a feeling. You can't cast a footprint from a pressure on your chest. All you have is the testimony, the raw, human fear in the voices of those who experienced it. So where does that leave us? With an unresolved question that is perhaps more relevant today than ever. In a world saturated with noise and information, the idea of a silent, observing presence hits a different nerve. The entity wasn't a monster in the woods. It was in the bedroom. It wasn't a problem of the external world, but a violation of the internal one. It reminds us that the most profound mysteries are often not about what is out there, but about what happens in here, in the quiet, vulnerable space of our own minds and homes. The people of Point Pleasant faced a phenomenon that weaponized silence and privacy against them. And in their stories, were forced to confront an uncomfortable possibility that some doors, once opened, can't be closed by simply turning on the light. Thank you for listening to this exploration of the silent and the suffocating. If this story unsettled you, in that thoughtful way we love here at the Unexplained Archive, please consider sharing it with someone who appreciates a good mystery. For more deep dives into the shadows, subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This is Ibnul J. Farabi for Light Not Studios. Stay curious, but maybe leave a night light on. You can find more of our work at https://www.lightnotstudios.com. Until next time.